Hi everyone, I'm Anchita V. Nair, co-founder and COO of Culture. Welcome to this talk organized by Heritage Olympiad. The Heritage Olympiad is India's only Olympiad on art, culture and heritage. And today we are joined by Shrinkala Sahai. She is an arts writer, a radio producer and a mental health practitioner. Her latest book, India's Classical Music and Dance, has been published this year and is one of the few books on classical arts for children. She's a radio producer and presenter with Radio Web Hindustani, an online radio on classical music, and has conducted workshops on podcasting and radio with learners from across the globe. She's the founder secretary of Swayam Foundation and works with diverse populations for wellness and mental health advocacy. Hi, Shrinkla. So happy to have you here with us.
Thank you, Anchita, for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
We actually I would like to tell you that we referred to your book while we were creating the questions for the Heritage Olympiad because it's such a extensive wonderful resource. It covers a gamut of topics in within 87 little pages, so thank you so much for that. But what was the motivation for you to write this book, now that it has been called the Encyclopedia of Indian Music and Dance for Children? Where did the whole journey start?
First of all, Anchita, congratulations to the entire team for organizing the Olympiad. I think it's one of the few that go into the area of heritage. So, congratulations to the culture team for organizing that. And I'm so glad that you're using the book as a resource. That was the idea that we started with. And, the commissioning editor at Westland Red Panda, Vidhi Bhargava. I think that was the idea when we started discussing this book, that there is no one-stop reference for Indian classical music and dance both, where young learners can just flip through, a visually exciting book as well, and in very simple language, something that can lay out what are the different aspects of the classical performing arts, so that at a glance one can get an idea. And that's how the whole brainstorming happened. And of course there was a lot of back and forth of how to integrate everything, how to make it more exciting, how to bring it out in the language that young learners can identify with. So yes, that was the
Right.
genesis of the idea, and I'm sure it has reached the target audience readers with something like the Olympiad as well.
And what was your process of research? Like how to decide what to focus on, what to leave out, considering the vast history of Indian classical arts? Like how do you decide what's relevant for children's book and what's not? You know?
Anjita, I think that's a beautiful question because there was a lot of thought that went behind that. As you said, that it's an 87-page book, and there was so much to cover, and always I felt like I'm maybe leaving out something important. This should also be there, that should also be there. Um, I felt that it's important to bring out different aspects of the cultural history of India, also some of those things which may have been left out in regular books or references on Indian classical music and dance, and maybe bring in a spirit of questioning for the young learners, because history is never one truth. It's never one linear narrative.
Absolutely.
There are many different perspectives. So for instance, in this book I've made sure to include especially the history of women musicians and dancers, what we have often known as, in quotes, the wives and the courtesans and the devadasis, because that's often
Right.
left out in this regular tradition of how we understand Indian classical music and dance history. So there was the
Right.
urge to bring in voices which have been maybe sidelined in regular discourse, and to make it diverse and inclusive. So that's why I've tried to bring out different the connections with different communities that
Right.
different forms and genres of art have had.
Right. And in the process, did you like speak to experts of the field? How did you go about it?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think that though the actual writing of the book happened in about 6 months during the pandemic period. But the actual process of getting the book together and getting this whole knowledge together, the resources together, started maybe way back. So, as you generously mentioned in my introduction, also, I've been working in radio for a long time, and especially with Indian classical music. So these conversations have been ongoing for over a decade, where I've interviewed a lot of performing artists, researchers, musicologists, dance scholars. Having trained in arts and aesthetics myself, I've written extensively on music and dance. And
Okay.
to bring together those conversations, those questions, and to keep those conversations open. So this was
Right.
a process that, I would say it's like a continuum that's coming on for a decade in my own work, and sort of, concretized and came together in this little book.
It's a wonderful book. What I loved about your book was there were these different corners, like the activity corners, which was aptly termed as the Riyaz room. This encourages young readers to pick a song and identify rasa experiences it creates, or how many Kathak chakkars they can take, which I thought was a great way to engage children, because then they will remember the book, the section, and the topic. Have you done any workshops with children? How did you come up with these little tasks for the Riyaz room?
So I've been trained in classical dance myself, and I have taught dance for a number of years
Mhm.
to young learners, starting from the age of 6, going on to, I don't know, 60 years, because I think that learning process should be always open to everyone. And I've also
Absolutely.
been teaching at universities in performance studies and cultural studies. So thinking of how to make it more experiential, make it something that's not just theoretical and in the book, and something that they feel they have to cram up and remember. And so
Yeah.
even when young learners, children, are preparing for something like an Olympiad, how is it that they're able to remember it in their body? How is it that they can use it in their daily life, and not just think of it as a test and remember it, forget it, and move on? How to bring
Right.
it into everyday life? So that's why I brought in these little corners where they can try out things, where they can understand what does rasa really feel like. And that rasa is not just when you're watching a dance performance or a music performance, but in every day you experience so many rasas. So
Right.
art is just an extension. I really believe strongly that art is an extension of our daily life, our lived experiences, and I wanted to bring it out for children as well.
So that's a great thought. I mean, especially for children, because that's what they will carry with them as they move forward in life. Even if they learn a particular art form, sometimes they don't understand why it is, what goes behind it, what is the feelings that are associated with it, unless you sometimes explain it to them. So this is a great way to sort of start that. Another corner that I really liked was the Kissa Story Corner. And it travels back, bringing alive anecdotes about different artists and personalities who have made an impact on the Indian arts, such as Tansen, Gangubai Hangal. Can you tell us more about what the idea behind the Kissa Corner was?
So one thing that's really unique and special about the classical arts is that it's very anecdotal. It's an oral tradition, as we say, and it's
Right.
only now that we're writing so much about it and recording it, documenting it. But the
Yeah.
documentation has largely been from in the Guru Shishya tradition. It has largely been from one generation to the other through all these stories that make it so lively and make it come alive. So I really felt like it's something unique to the Indian classical arts and should be kept alive when we are bringing forth this knowledge. And the way to do it would be to think of certain principles that were important, and how did they actually come about in people's lives. So what were their stories around them? How their personal journeys were integrated or woven into their artistic journeys. So that's how this happened. And since you mentioned Gangubai Hangal, Anchita, there's a very interesting personal anecdote that I have with her, because
Oh,
so
wow.
she I had the chance of interviewing her
Mhm.
when she was around 90. It was her 90th birthday,
Oh, wow.
and
Mhm.
probably one of her last interviews to the media.
Mhm.
And my team and me, we had gone to Hubli, her hometown, to interview her. And just the experience of meeting her was so different from all I had read, everything that has been written about her, her own biography as well. But to
Yeah.
meet her, to see her in person, and for instance, she saw me between the recordings at one point, between recording the interview, and I was just sitting next to her, and she looked at my feet and said, "How do you find shoes your size?" And I was so shocked. What is she saying? And she said, and she's really this petite woman with a very fiery spirit. So
Mhm.
she said, because I can't find footwear of my size and I have to go in the children's section. Does it happen with you? And when this happens, it reminds me of this particular bandish. And she started humming that bandish. So
Wow.
so it's these stories like this, it's anecdotes like this that make it so rich and make it so relatable and connectable,
Right.
that that maybe we can understand how these artistic journeys are part of our daily lives. And even for young learners, students who are learning classical music and dance, it is
Mhm.
not just that they go to this class and that's it, then they forget about it. How do
Right.
they bring in their riyas and what they've learned into their daily lives? I think that was the idea behind it.
No, that's a great anecdote. I mean, to have that experience, that's wonderful. So now that you brought up the Guru Shishya, format of teaching and learning, um, with the onset of pandemic, do you think there has been a change in engagement with classical dance and music in India in terms of learning format as performances online or teachings online? What you're talking about, the anecdotes, the oral history side of it, do you think that gets affected a little bit?
I think it has been affected a lot in these times, especially for the younger generation. I mean, for people who have been learning and performing for years, it may have been something that they adapted to quickly. And then, we are now opening up. I mean, the spaces are opening up now to physical offline classes and performances. But for young people, for children, these 2 years have been so formative, right? Where they've been learning on these little screens online, and
Yeah.
their interaction has been so different. So I think it'll maybe even take a little bit more time for us to process how it has transformed the field, really,
Right.
and how we look at things differently. For instance, so many dance films started coming up in the pandemic, where artists were using the camera in a different way, not just to document their riyas or their performance, but to really look at different aspects of their practice and performance through the lens. And that has changed for many artists. That has changed uh, how they interact with this lens, how they use, how the body can be broken down into different parts when we look at it, unlike the way that we look at it on a stage or in a live offline class. So can we just look at the hastas and just the hands, for instance, or can we just focus on the abhinaya? When you're on stage, sometimes it's really difficult to look at the close, look at the expressions closely. But with the with this online mechanism, so many abhinaya classes have happened. So little things like that have really made a difference. And I think maybe in a couple of years we'll know more about what this next generation has really taken from these years and how it's changed things for them.
Yeah, I mean, making the lens a part of the performance, I think that's a great way of sort of making the best of the situation that we have. So yeah, it's nice. um you brought up the bringing lens into the whole thing. So what I also like, several movies have also been made about the state of classical music in the country. Most recent that comes to mind is Netflix's The Disciple, that shows the slight destitute situation of classical music and musicians. Do you think the representation of classical dance and music impacts how we perceive them, and how many people then take it up, and in the future?
Absolutely, Anchita, it does, because I mean, how are youngsters today actually accessing knowledge? Of course, what you're watching online, what's going in your social media feeds, all of that really impacts how you think about something. So if a youngster comes to me and says that, oh, classical music, and when you ask them what do you think about it, oh, it's so difficult, it's so boring, these
Right.
regular stereotypes that come up. Yes, maybe because it has been shown in a certain way. Maybe because people think that it represents a different time, a different era, which is difficult to connect with.
Well,
And there is also a kind of, I think that it's also important that we look at how to, in media, what we call repackaging
right.
the arts to make them more accessible, to make them connect with the contemporary more. And
Mhm.
many, I see many artists today are attempting to do that. So I think that is a very positive trend, because what is the classical after all? It's not a dead tradition that's just about preserving. It's also
Right.
about the possibility of using that language to grow, and it's classical only because it has withstood the test of time. So when times change, then the content and the form will also undergo change, and I think it's only that we need to be open to the idea of that change and that transformation happening.
Right. In fact, that's the whole idea behind culture as an organization, also, that we try to make culture and heritage and the arts as accessible as possible. And this is the right time to plug our app, which is going to come out soon, where we are actually trying to take academic content on culture and the arts and make it into short format, sizable, digestible, consumable content for a regular person to just take it in their daily life, and make it a part of their uh, media that they consume. Um, and coming to that, when you were writing this book on a classical arts, it's a hard task, how, because given how dense the information is. So how did you go about trying to make it more comprehend, make it more simple or accessible for children? Like, one of the things that you put in was the Shruti box section, which I really like, which presents a lot of very technical information, like the types of compositions, ragas and talas, but you try to make it in a way where it can be used by a child itself, and to sort of identify these technical terms. So what was the idea behind that?
Honestly, Anchita, it was probably the most difficult part of this whole process, because I have the knowledge about classical music and dance,
Mhm.
but to be able to share it in the language of people who are between, the little people who are between 8 and 12 to 15 years, I
Right.
really had to go into their shoes a bit. So sometimes when I've tried to explain something, I've tried to go into how do they think, how do they experience the world, what would be an analogy, what would be a comparison that they would relate to, which would be very different from my generation, your generation. Like we have different
Absolutely.
frameworks. So it
Yeah.
was very challenging for me to really step into their shoes and then try to understand what would work here. And yes, you're absolutely right that there's so much information, and I just didn't want to make it information heavy. So and that would put off people, that there's just too much in there. So to
Right.
break down each concept into what is the essence of this, like that really made me think that, okay, when I talk of classical music, what is the really essence? First of all, what is the essence of the classical in Indian classical? And for me, it was definitely about rasa. In music, it is about rag. These are two aspects which are so unique to the Indian classical arts. and now how to explain it, because if you go to the actual texts, if you go into research, there is so much. There are different perspectives on how you can define rasa itself. It is something that eludes definition and translation in the English
Right.
language.
Right.
So it because it's so ingrained into the language and worldview of the time that it's coming from. So to
Right.
be able to explain it in very lucid, simple, contemporary language was a challenge, and I really had to break it down for myself first, and then go into the ahead of little people what would connect with them, what language would connect with them, what metaphors, analogies would connect with them, and then try it out. So it was very, very trial and error, and again trying to do something again. It was like that.
No, no, you've tried and succeeded, because the best part about it is that it also doesn't talk down to children. It is, taking them as intelligent, beings,
Yeah.
and explaining to them as much as explanation is required, and not more than that. So that you've done wonderfully. So I think, through THO, one of the aims is to bring Indian arts to young students' attention who might not be aware of diverse musical and dance tradition the country has to offer. According to you, what can be done to improve the situation of classical music and dance in the country at an institutional or state level? Like, for example, Pandit Ravi Shankar, I think in an interview said classical music should be taught in kindergartens to keep the tradition alive. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I would absolutely agree with that, because, yes, I mean, everyone may not want to be a performing artist, and that's perfectly fine. But, there is a saying in the arts that तानसेन को समझने के लिए कानसेन होने भी जरूरी है. So we need rasikas, we need connoisseurs, we need people who understand and appreciate the art to be able to also experience the art. It's between the audience and the artist. Without the audience, then it becomes another Riyaz room, right?
Right, right.
So there has to be that connect, and for that to happen, yes, only when it's part of your daily life, like anything else, can it really be integrated. So Anchita, now there's so much emphasis on arts integrated learning, right? And
Yes.
Olympiad is also one way of doing that. I think that's a very, very positive step, because when we include arts not just as, in quotes, extracurricular, but as a
Mhm.
means of as a companion to the mainstream subjects and part of the curriculum, then parents would also be more excited or more attuned to encouraging their kids to learn these subjects. And I think it's really important, because the parents role becomes very key at this time. And sometimes I feel like parents get so drawn into what is happening in their kids academic life and how they are scoring, that they
Mhm.
forget that these extracurricular subjects are just as important for the holistic development of the child. So I would really agree that it should be there at in primary school. It should be a part of curriculum. It would be great if parents can expose their kids to more performances, to more exhibitions, to just having them get a sense of what art is like and what possibilities it holds. Or even if just watching videos online. And I think here it's really important that we today, children are living in what we call the instaverse, right? It's not the universe anymore, it's the
Yeah.
instaverse. So
Right.
how do you package these long compositions into maybe short videos that can be put up in the medium that children use? So I'll
Mhm.
just share one example of how there is a lot of flexibility and adaptability in the classical arts. Many people feel there isn't, but that's not true. Because when
Mhm.
recording came to India in 1902, and many of the great legendary musicians of that time refused to record, because they felt that their voice would somehow be affected. That's the anecdote that's told most
Wow.
often.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Okay.
felt that once the gramophone is there, it'll come somehow absorb their voice, or something will happen and it won't be as it naturally is. The other thing was that they felt that we are singing these long 1 hour compositions, Bada Khayal, as we call it in Hindustani classical music. Now, the recording technology was only 3 minutes. For
Oh.
the RPMs and EPMs. So it was only 3 minutes. That was the technology. So now the music had to adapt to fit into that technology. And
Right.
here we see that so many of the gramophone era stars that came up were the people, men and women both. They were the people who were able to adapt their music. They tried, how do we bring in, maybe how do we sing a chota khayal, maybe then how do we maybe just bring in a tan, here, and how do we just start with this, how do we elaborate on the rag in just 3 minutes. For some people who felt like, oh my god, this is changing the structure of the music so much, it's just not done, their music remains unrecorded.
Right.
So there is this adaptability and flexibility that did come in even in the early 20th century. So
Right.
definitely it's there, it can come in even now, and it happens. So I don't think it's such a rigid structure that we can't play with. I think that artists who are daring can play with it a little bit,
Right.
and creators, content creators like you all, can facilitate that and help that playfulness, and that would really help.
Right. And I think the role of the institution like ours and yours is like making people understand what is going on, like the annotation part of it, where it becomes more accessible and understandable for a lay person. And slowly in a short format you start, and then you can move on to more complex and more longer formats. There is always a space for both these to exist simultaneously, like T20 and
Test matches,
test
yes.
matches do exist together, so why not? So yeah. Are there any similar projects in the pipeline?
Oh, so I now really found this exciting world of writing for children. So I would really love to do more of that, because it was extremely challenging for me. I've written research papers and all of that on the arts, but this was something that was new and exciting. I'd love to do more such books, and working on different ways of being able to bring this knowledge in an easy way for young learners. So yes, that's there, that's in the pipeline. Since I've looked at the folk arts, the classical arts right now, maybe something on what the folk arts are, or what it means, or
Yes,
what
so
even this nomenclature of classical and folk is, to be able
versus
to
folk.
question
Yes,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, shall we take some audience questions then?
yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay. Um, Surabhi asks, has the decline of classical music and dance something to do with the taste of the current generation? What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, so Surbi, that's a much contested question, a much asked question. But I feel like every time, in every decade, we start feeling like uh, our traditional arts are somehow on the decline. But is that really true? Because I do see a lot of young people taking up arts and experimenting with it. Um, Sometimes some performing artists and gurus I've talked to also feel that it's okay to have a niche and discerning audience. It doesn't, maybe the classical arts were not really meant always for everyone to enjoy. Maybe it's not always for the masses to enjoy. So there's a debate here. I'm just bringing out both the positions.
Right,
And
right.
it's okay to have a group of people who are really committed to this kind of music and dance, and would just really binge on it.
Right.
And it's also okay, it's just like but yeah, your question is also interesting in how do tastes get cultivated. And yes, every generation has its trends. And is classical dance and music trending right now? Yes, sometimes these days we are coming up with these little short format videos of dance, especially, which I
Mhm.
feel are really picking up on different themes. And I've seen many dancers working on those since the
Right.
live performances of stage performances were not happening. And those are really being completely consumed like anything on Instagram and all of that. So I think that yes, it depends on how we make those thematics trending.
Yeah. I'm just reminded of someone telling me how in Kudiyattam, the dance drama begins with the performer, inviting the gods from all the four corners of the stage. Because even if there is only one or two uh, people in the audience, they perform for the gods or for anyone. So they don't need a full house. Sometimes the one discerning audience or just the gods are enough.
Yeah.
So that is also a school of thought, that we don't need a lot of people, but some people who appreciate it is good enough. Someone asked, do you emphasize the need of arts, including classical music and dance, in helping people deal with mental health issues, especially when they are stuck at home? I think this is a topic close to your heart.
Yes, thank you so much for asking that. I absolutely do. I feel that the arts, all the arts actually, are therapeutic in one way or the other. Personally, I've been working on the therapeutic aspects of art, and that is what also inspired me to sort of really use that framework in my therapeutic practice. I think it's really important. And there are a lot of research. If we go into research, there's a lot of work that's been done on how different ragas, for instance, have a different effect on your well-being. So, the whole time theory of Hindustani classical music, for instance, why is it that certain notes, a certain combination of notes, like say Rag Bhairav or Todi, which are considered morning ragas, what is it that makes them more meditative? And when a rag has this meditative experience, how does it sit in your body? Uh, Definitely, your from a neuroscientific point of view, your parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, where you feel calmer, where you feel less anxious, where you start focusing more, and these have been used extensively in therapy. So I think that those aspects are really open for more exploration in terms of research as well, and to be integrated into both mental health practice, wellness practices. And I think that's happening already, because right now there is so much emphasis on Eastern systems of meditation. And, I think that the arts definitely find their place there when we think of it.
Right. This is a fascinating topic. I think we should have another talk altogether just talking about this. Um, Meenakshi Vashisht asks, does having a clear professional journey ahead, or the contrary of it, also has an impact on young learners deciding whether to take up classical music or dance form in today's time? As you have interviewed senior artists, what has been their take on this?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. And always, like mostly the last question that I've asked most of the gurus is this: that what is your advice to young students and performers who really want to go into this field?
Mhm.
And what I think that today's gurus understand that it's an age where people are doing multiple things. They
Mhm.
have multiple avenues and opportunities.
Right.
That's also great. Sometimes they also lament this, complain about this, that, oh my God, my students are doing too many things these days. We
Right.
only used to focus on, on doing our riyas and performing. But some are also very encouraging about it, that yes, you may also be a professional, a working professional, and you may also be a vocalist at the same time.
Mhm.
And you may be able to balance both of these things. So I think in terms of career opportunities, it's really important that gurus work with their students to really initiate them into different opportunities of how they can make it viable and sustainable for
Right.
themselves. And that's really, it's really important, because unless you have something to, you have a backup plan, or you don't need to do this for your livelihood, then that's a different thing. But if you do, then it's very important that your gurus are also your mentors in that context, that they can be
Right.
sure about it. Most people do take up teaching because that's something that it's a very direct livelihood that comes with having this knowledge of the classical arts. And there are
Right.
many other ways to do it. So many people are becoming arts managers these days. which was a
Really?
term that we didn't hear in the 1990s, for instance. But there's so many people who are taking up arts management. So I think that's a very interesting career choice as well that goes with your artistic journey. So a lot of these avenues are opening up.
Okay, interesting. Deborishi Gogoi asks, do you think the classical music and dance often have been a pathway of expression of female liberation and femininity?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Yes, in many ways it has. Say, for instance, you take the Hindustani classical form, you take a khayal or you take a thumri, for instance. Now, thumri is mostly about feminine longing. And Anchita, I really used to find it very fascinating that the lyrics are all about feminine longing,
Mhm.
and the protagonist is the heroine. It's never the hero, it's the heroine who is expressing, as the Naika, is expressing her longing. And we also have a lot of these, with their deep baritone voice. We have a lot of the male vocalists of the last century singing these thumris with such, in such a delicate way. It's the gender dynamic of it is
Right.
very interesting. But I think that in this question, what's also important is that how are we revisiting that, because that was another time. The lyrics are, whose voice is it, in terms of not just singing but the lyrics, the thought, whose voice is it, and how can we reinterpret that? I think reinterpretation is very important, because
Right.
sometimes you may find that it's a very stereotypical and limited idea of what it means to be a woman.
Woman.
And
That
then you may want to expand that, you may want to reinterpret the same lyrics, or maybe change them, sort of, give them a little twist, which many people have done and they do. And that's very important. Unless that happens, it'll be out of tune with the times, which I don't think makes it very popular then.
right. Context is so important to everything, to all kinds of art. So yes, absolutely. To as the last question, let me repeat your last question. What what would you say to young performers who are learning Indian classical music and dance right now?
Oof, touche. Okay. I would say, just, I think what's most important is to have fun with it. Sometimes we just start, we feel the burden of the mantle of tradition so much on our shoulders that we forget to be playful with it. And by having fun or being playful, I don't mean that disrespect the tradition, but to understand where it's coming from and to see how you can play with it a little, question it a little, be a little critical, while being within that framework, and
Framework.
even trying to push the framework a little. And that's okay. I mean, that's how a tradition moves forward.
Right.
Otherwise it wouldn't be alive at all. So that's what I would say. And for the idea even in the book was that young learners should start to question, should have more curiosity. Maybe this was something that was, honestly, Anchita, was somewhere not emphasized in the last century of how we see the Guru Shishya tradition, where it was all about absolute, just surrendering to the Guru. But
Mhm.
now, as you said, the context is important. The context is not that, the context is different. So I would say to nurture the curiosity, even for someone who's teaching the classical arts, to nurture the curiosity in young learners and to see where it leads them, and for them to be more creative with it than to be constrained in it, is
Right.
really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shrinkla, so much. I had so much fun talking to you about your book, and I hope you write many, many such books, and we will definitely include them in the Heritage Olympiad questions. So, yeah,
Thank you so much, Anshita. Likewise, it was great talking to you, and thank you all who have joined us today or who are, watching this later. It's been great to interact with you, and all the very best for the Olympiad. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful, thing that you people are doing.
thank you so much.